good morning, good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are. As always, I don't care. Today we are here to talk about the first day of the expansion. How did it go, guys? What did you do? Was it good? Were you stuck in queue? As you watch this video, are you still stuck in a queue? Because your realm is ginormous. Who knows? After, let's say, complications, thanks Blizzard, I got to leveling my first character, which, as I mentioned, was my shaman. It went pretty smooth. Could have gone faster if I didn't get ganked by Happy Alliance, but this is the price of war mode. So in about a little under 7 hours it was done, and immediately after I jumped on my monk. Remember, if you followed my tips, you need to resist the urge to stay on your main and start doing heroics, world quests, mythic zeros and whatnot, and just jump immediately on all your alts and level them all. This is the best moment to level all your characters. Particularly your under-geared character. You can just abuse the rush of all the other players and just tag mobs and not having to actually put in work with your under-geared shitty damage character. If you try to do it in a month from now, that's gonna be much harder. So how did you guys enjoy the leveling experience? Because I did this already like 6 times. I had over 80 levels done in the beta on multiple characters, so I already know what I was getting into. I already know, where to rush in certain quests, which annoying side quests to skip. Some of you, I'm sure, use some add-ons, some very helpful add-ons for people who have never been in the beta, like Azeroth Autopilot and similar, questing add-ons. But I mentioned this because I've seen quite a few comments about how RP heavy the story has been. So I was wondering how you felt. There is a lot of escorting, a lot of listening and just watching people talk for a long time. Lots of story, background, which, some people will like, right? It is a very RPG-focused, single-player-oriented type of storytelling compared to what we get usually. Legion and Warlords did have story, right? But this one seems to be particularly heavy on story. So I wondered which one you preferred. If you enjoyed it, if you liked the story as well, and also if you would have rather just parked yourself in a dungeon and just leveled there for hours and hours and just ignore the story. I think I enjoyed it. When you don't have at the back of your mind the notion that you have to rush, the notion that you just want to get to max level, that everything you're doing, you're wasting time, essentially, isn't really here now, right? Because there is no grind, there is no daily thing you have to try to farm as hard as possible right now. So you're not losing time by leveling and taking maybe half an hour longer because there is more RP. So I didn't have much of a problem with it. Tell me how it felt to you. This, heavier importance on the story. Now, talking about story, we have to talk about the zones, right? For the zones, we're going to pose judgment for the Mo and for Torghast because you haven't really had too much of an experience yet. In the Mo, it's just the entry level for the escape, and then you go back there for a few minutes really just to get Morgraine out and Prince Renatal out. And also Torghast is just the first introductory 3 layers to help the Prince. So we will go back to the Mo and Torghast in a couple of days when, people will be doing them daily and weekly. We're gonna have more opinions on that. But for the actual zones, the way the leveling was spread out is that Bastion was your thicker, chunkier level of experience. And then you had Maldraxxus, which was a little bit less. And then you had Ardenweald, which was a little bit less. And then you had Ventir in Revendreth, which was the fastest. Probably giving people a little bit of a worse feeling in Revendreth because that's when people start hitting max level at the 2nd chapter of the story or the 3rd chapter of the story. So they have to continue the story anyways, even if they're level 60. So maybe that's gonna give them a worse opinion on the Revendreth zone. For me, though, the best zone to level in was Revendreth. Besides the aesthetics, I think Revendreth is the best, as well as Bastion. They have the 2 better aesthetics as well as layout of the zones. I think Maldraxxus has a lot of verticality, a lot of hills and mountains, and there's a lot of annoying mobs to deal with in Maldraxxus, and Ardenweald feels very sparse, right? A lot of the quests, there is a lot of movement between quests, and some of the quests were pretty annoying to me, so I didn't particularly enjoy Ardenweald. No, I have nothing to do against Furies. I do, but not for this particular judgment of Ardenweald. I enjoyed the story in Bastion, although it was developed a little bit in a cliche way, the Mostworn not wanting to become NPCs and being stripped of all their feelings and thoughts of their past. It was interesting. You wouldn't expect it. You go there, you have to turn into an arbiter, you have to turn into an emissary, a messenger. You have to be completely impartial, so you have to get rid of all possible biases. Obviously, you know, if you're supposed to be an arbiter, judging someone from a planet, and someone from that planet burned your entire village and your entire family alive, if you remember that part, that's gonna be a problem for you in being impartial, right? Although the execution, I think, was a little bit cliche, a little bit uninspired. I think the worst zone when it came to storyline was Maldraxxus. It was my first feeling, you know, months ago when I first did the zone. It's basically just, hey, the boss is missing, it's a free-for-all brawl, and that's it. Yeah, you discover that the free-for-all brawl was essentially bankrolled and supported by the jailer, of course, but beyond that, it's still just not very interesting. Ardenweald, I kind of enjoyed the, you know, the thought, the theory of the Drast being behind all of that, because someone gave them a tip that their inability to procreate, the inability to regenerate, can be fixed by going into Ardenweald and taking the power of their trees to regenerate souls inside podlings. But it was just way too similar for me to enjoy, way too similar to Suramar, right? If you haven't heard, people have already made connections, not just with Ardenweald, but with the story as a whole. The fact that anima is scarce, and people need anima to survive, so now without anima they are sort of withering, they are sort of dying. That is very, very similar to Suramar and Arkwine, right? And Ardenweald is basically the zone with the closest connection to Suramar. There is people, or in this case souls, dying and withering because they haven't got Arkwine as anima, right? It's just too similar. I liked the Ventir zone for the storyline as well, although I think it would have been better if they made Denatrius not such an obvious villain from the start. I think it should have been a little bit more subtle. I think the turn from face to heel of the story of Denatrius should have been a little bit more improvised and sudden, rather than completely obvious the first time you see him talk. And also completely obvious the first time you look at the dungeon journal and you see that Denatrius is the last boss of the first raid. That sort of spoils things, right? But for me, as a whole, the leveling experience was pretty enjoyable. As I said, first of all, I wouldn't have done it like 80 levels in the beta if it was awful. But also because, as I mentioned, Blizzard has done a good job gating a lot of content to the point that rushing the leveling system and ignoring everything about the story and about the process of meeting all the characters throughout the story becomes essentially an annoyance, because all you care is getting to max level. I'm sure some people will still do this, but now it basically doesn't hurt you. It won't really hurt your character if you go through the story, if you go through some RPing. I think it was a good choice, because the story is fine to me. So I personally enjoyed it, and I am still enjoying it. So this is where it's up to you guys. This is now a community sharing video. You have to tell me, how was your leveling experience? Which of the zones you enjoyed the most? Both for the storyline, if you have never went through, if you have never read any spoilers, or if you have never watched any videos or streams or anything of the sort. Which one impressed you the most? Which one was better to level? Maybe you really liked the story in Ardenweald, but the leveling was terrible. Maybe you liked the leveling in Ardenweald, but the story was terrible. So, you tell me. Also, share your future plans. Please tell me you're planning on leveling alts in the next few days rather than sticking to your main for heroics and mythic zeros and whatnot, because that's the right play. Also, some favorite characters, some more annoying characters. My more annoying characters are pretty much everyone in Ardenweald, except the Winter Queen. She is fine, but everyone else gets the rope. In Revendreth, Teutar is a pretty cool dude, but Denatrius was really the standout, flamboyant villain character. It was very nicely done, albeit, as I said, a little bit obvious. And in Bastion, I've seen some other people having a similar thought. I dislike the whole idea of becoming an NPC without any memories, so I can't really feel myself from their perspective. I wouldn't like being them, so at best I can feel for the Mostworn, or maybe the little owls, those little fat shits running around, but not the Kyrian. So you guys tell me about your experiences of the first day, and then tomorrow we will go for the second day recap, at least for me, on my second and third character. So with this, guys, I'm done. I take my leave, and in the meantime, I'll go back leveling. And so should you.